moving in lockstep with that. Mueller is getting, every week, he gets closer and closer to the Oval Office. And the closer he gets to the Oval Office, the more everything else seems to be on the brink of just falling apart completely.
Yeah, and Donnie Deutsch, you and I both knew Donald Trump for a decade before he became president of the United States, knew him in social settings. Of course, as I said at the top of the show, I announced very clearly in December of 2015 that I was voting for Jeb. And then when he got out, I said I was voting for Kasich, and of course, got nasty tweets because of that. But all that being said, you and I, and just about anybody else that we have spoken to that knew Trump, even his closest friends, if he has close friends, are all shocked that he was this bad. Do you find it hard to believe that the guy that you knew for a decade has turned out to be this bad? I know there will be a lot of people that say, oh, how could you know because he attacked Rosie O'Donnell in 2006? How can you not know because he did this or that or the other? I understand that. I understand all of that. That said, people that knew him for a decade, even though we didn't vote for him, could have never assumed, or at least I couldn't have assumed, he would have been this unmoored, this horrific.
Joe, I actually get asked that, and I was friends with him as anybody you would call a friend, as close as anybody could be to be called a friend for 20 years. And my explanation is always this. I always said, you know, not a guy I would necessarily want to be in a foxhole with, but I always felt he was kind of in on the joke. Very sharp.
In on the joke.
In on the joke.
The key. In on the joke.
You know, kind of a lounge act that he was playing and his eyes were twinkling along, you know, like a Howard Stern. Like Howard knows what he's doing and he's a different guy. And I always felt, you know what? He was something charming. Like I said, wouldn't want to be in a foxhole with him. You had to check your pockets when he left. I'm not saying he's the most moral high ground girl, but nothing as far as the twisted, in many cases cruel and evil, and also kind of unhinged as we're seeing now. And what scares me, and this week more than ever, you felt something shift this week. You really felt the noose tightening. And I touched on this last hour. I would challenge, and now trade war thing, I challenge people to go back and watch Wag the Dog, which was a movie where the candidate had a scandal, a sexual scandal, and his inner circle created a fake war with Albania.
Right.
Unfortunately, we're not in a fake, and I am truly terrified of what he is capable of doing. Nothing short of, I know this is insane, starting a war to protect his hide. And we have to start to look at this latest tariff situation, which clearly cost a lot of people a lot of money, but not lives. What is this man cornered, dangerous, unhinged now? A very different man than 20 years ago. What is he capable of doing?
Yeah, and I just, to underline what you said, he was always in on the joke. And Willie, you knew him as well. And again, yes, he could be cruel publicly. He could be unkind. But the level of chaos, I think, has far exceeded a lot of people's expectations. And the problem now is, again, what Donnie said, cornered. Donald Trump is proving to be a very dangerous person for his own White House, a dangerous person for people who are investing in the stock market, and a very dangerous person for those of us who care about U.S. interests globally.
Well, he may have started a trade war, for starters. He may not have yet started a war, but if he goes through with these steel and aluminum tariffs, we'll have a trade war on our hands, that's for sure.
Chaos has been part of how Donald Trump ran his businesses. Chaos has been how he ran his campaign, and chaos has marked how he has run the country. But is there something worse about this week's maelstrom? An ally of the president's tells CNN's Gloria Borger that this past week has been different, and, quote, something is very wrong, that advisors are scared. The president is spiraling, lashing out of control. The chaos is not just about staffing or the president's intemperate tweets. It's had a real policy component this week, with the president's sudden announcement of tariffs on steel sending shockwaves not only among his staffers and administration, caught completely unprepared for the announcement, but frankly around the world. The president actually tweeting today, quote, trade wars are good and easy to win. This on top of the extremely mixed messages from the president about what needs to change in the wake of the massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida. It's entirely possible, of course, some other shocking news will break this hour and as we head into the dangerous waters of Friday evening. But with that risk, let us take a moment now to try to unpack and understand this hot mess of a week. There's already been one resignation announcement this week, and now it's been revealed two others are considering leaving. National Security Advisor General H.R. McMaster may be gone by the end of the month, according to an administration official. And there are new reports today that Gary Cohn, the president's top economic advisor, is on the brink of leaving as well, following the president's, shall we call it, hastily announced tariffs yesterday, which Cohn fought tooth and nail. Now, it was just Tuesday, of course, when we learned that Jared Kushner's interim security clearance had been downgraded significantly from the high-level top-secret SCI, to the rather low-level secret, sparked by Chief of Staff John Kelly's new rules in the wake of the scandal surrounding former top aide Rob Porter, who had security clearance despite also being, frankly, quite blackmailable, what with two ex-wives accusing him of domestic abuse. Now, Kushner, according to a source, feels that everyone at the White House is out to get him, questioning, quote, why is John Kelly doing this? But even White House staffers could not believe the security and ethical questions raised in a New York Times story this week surrounding Kushner meeting as a top White House official with the CEOs of two companies, amidst those companies lending hundreds of millions of dollars to Kushner businesses he owns stake in. And that's just Jared. As for his wife, Ivanka Trump, sources telling CNN that U.S. counterintelligence officials are investigating one of her international business deals. Now, the Times reports that the president has privately said that Jared and Ivanka should have never come to the White House in the first place, and they should leave, even asking Chief of Staff Kelly for help in getting them to go. But the Times also reports when the president speaks directly to his daughter and son-in-law, he tells them they should stay. All the while, we have other stuff, the Russia investigation, the president fuming over his public spat with his own Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, and, of course, the latest ethics scandal plaguing his cabinet members this week, HUD Secretary Ben Carson. The TV version of the president can't even catch a break this week, with Mr. Trump lashing out on Twitter this morning at Alex Baldwin, before deleting it and correcting it to Alec, because, of course, it's important that the most powerful man in the world weigh in on the guy who portrays him on SNL. And don't forget, amidst all this, the president is about to lose hope. Hope Hicks, that is, one of his closest confidants, a Trump whisperer. One friend of President Trump's told CNN that Hope Hicks' departure would send the president into a, quote, tailspin, which, of course, prompts the question, she hasn't even left yet. If this isn't a tailspin, what is it?
Amid the usual Trump reality show in Washington this week, it would be easy to miss what is happening in China. But it is huge and consequential. China is making the most significant change to its political system in 35 years. What impact will this have on China and the world? That's the question every policymaker, business executive, and investor should be asking. In 1982, the Chinese Communist Party wrote into the country's constitution that its president and vice president could serve no more than 2 consecutive terms. This made China unique, a dictatorship with term limits. In most authoritarian regimes, the ruler accumulates power and over the years becomes more arrogant, corrupt, and unaccountable. This wasn't possible in the Chinese system, which limited any individual's power and focused instead on the collective, the party. China's unique model also produced an economic miracle. The country has had 3 decades of merit-based selection and promotion within the Communist Party, wise long-range planning, and smart pro-growth economic policies. Since 1978, China's GDP has grown at an astounding average annual rate of almost 10%, which the World Bank calls the fastest sustained expansion by a major economy in history. In addition, for decades, China seemed to be getting more institutionalized politically. Deng Xiaoping had ruled as a supreme leader, wielding power more from behind the scenes than from any of the offices he held. His successor, Jiang Zemin, held all the key posts when he was in power, and after his 2 terms as president, he did continue to lead the Central Military Commission for 2 more years, and even after that, he remained influential informally. Then when Jiang's successor, Hu Jintao, finished his 2 terms as president, he simultaneously relinquished the top military position and lost almost all his power at once. But that trend has now been turned on its head. If term limits are abolished, which is now almost certain, Xi Jinping could stay China's president, General Secretary of the Communist Party, and chairman of the Central Military Commission for the rest of his life. China is eliminating perhaps the central restraint in a political system that provides staggering amounts of power to the country's leaders. What will that do over time to the ambitions and appetites of leaders? Power tends to corrupt, Lord Acton famously wrote in 1887, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Perhaps China will avoid this tendency, but it has been widespread throughout history. China under Xi has also become more ambitious internationally. It is now the world's second largest economy, the third largest funder of the United Nations, and the provider of more peacekeepers than the other 4 Permanent Security Council members combined. The country has been bulking up its military while it has been devoting significant resources to far-flung cultural arms like Confucius Institutes. It has announced loans and investment spending, the Belt and Road Initiative, that will be around 10 times the size of the Marshall Plan by some estimates. It is determined to lead the world in fields like solar and wind power, electric cars, and artificial intelligence. Chinese scholars say it is now clear that China is entering a new era with a new system. Since the Communist Party took power in 1949, it had roughly 30 years of Mao Zedong's rule. That was followed by roughly 30 years of Deng Xiaoping and his system. It is now clear that we are in the third era, which might be 30 years of Xi Jinping. Is anybody in Washington paying attention?